The Nightmare Before Christmas is a stop-motion film following the misadventures of one Jack Skellington, the Pumpkin King. Jack lives in Halloween Town. Halloween Town is a community that caricatures the themes of Halloween and is inhabited by numerous creatures associated with the holiday. Although its citizens all come in different shapes and sizes, there is a continuity to their culture, that being an adherence to Halloween's thematic elements, such as fear, horror, and darkness. This culture permeates everything about them, from their dress, architecture, and social customs. Jack's large Gothic residence and white-collar clothing indicate that he enjoys great wealth and status in Halloween Town, and yet he finds himself disillusioned by the stultifying routine of his society, even if it is a society that revolves around him. After finishing the annual Halloween ceremony, Jack ventures wistfully into the woods, lamenting his current way of life. In his travels, he chances upon a series of mysterious trees that each provide gateways to other worlds, all of which corresponding with well-known seasonal holidays. While examining these trees, Jack slips and falls through the door to Christmasland, and he is captivated by what he finds. This world could not be at all more juxtaposed to his own, and he is enchanted by the barrage of differences. There are bright lights, freshly baked goods, and abundant snow. Having toured Christmasland, Jack returns home to Halloween Town in order to share his findings, intent on transforming his own world to that of Christmasland. It is of course easy to empathize with Jack. Working through the same routine in the same location can eventually become claustrophobic. Exposure to new experiences from traveling or otherwise can be a great way to drag one out of a malaise, and so it is understandable that Jack would be galvanized in this way. However, besides the immediate change of environment, it's hard to see what, if anything, specifically about Christmasland appeals to Jack. It is not the deeper differences in technology, culture, or lifestyle that seem to appeal to him, but rather that it is different. Indeed, Jack's soliloquy as he dances through the streets of Christmastown reveals that it is the uniqueness alone that appeals to him. Jack takes no interest in the deeper social forces that could be fueling these differences, but instead fixates on the immediate sights and senses of Christmastown and how they make him feel. For these reasons, it would appear that Jack is chasing an exoticism. He seeks to relieve himself of his own community's routine, but the irony here is that Christmastown is subject to its own routine. It, too, is fixated on a perpetual process of preparing and celebrating for the holiday. This is probably an equally tedious routine, but just one that Jack hasn't had an opportunity to grow tired of yet. Although Jack resents his own culture, it's at least a culture he understands. Jack's brief encounter with Christmasland is not sufficient to have properly imbibed it. In other words, Jack is enamored on a surface level by what to him is an exotic culture, but without understanding its many underpinnings. At any rate, Jack returns home galvanized with new purpose. Taking to the town podium, he lectures piously to his townsfolk of the new culture he's discovered, and declares that Halloween Town this year will themselves take on the role of delivering Christmas. Halloween Town's community is excited by tales of this exotic land and keenly take on the task. Continuing to deliver orders from his home, Jack studiously analyzes Christmasland, rigorously intellectualizing every perceived facet of it. He engages applied mathematics and elaborate experiments in order to try and replicate something that is ultimately organic. It becomes quickly apparent that Jack, as well as the other citizens of Halloween Town, do not quite understand Christmasland, and do not seem to be able to accurately emulate it. The commendable efforts Jack has made to intellectualize Christmasland has to some extent demystified it, but their own cultural emanations are not able to capture its core essence. Their attempts to imitate the conventions, aesthetics, and residents of Christmasland are heavily influenced by their own culture. This is epitomized in Jack's mispronunciation of Santa Claus as Sandy Claus, his natural mental lurch towards the symbolic danger of claws revealing his cultural roots with Halloween. Now, for all his affection for Christmasland, Jack seemingly has little interest in preserving it. As part of the operation, Jack has no reservation in ordering the abduction of Santa Claus, unappreciative of the damage this might inflict on the Christmasland that he holds so much affection for. It is notable that Santa Claus, unlike Jack, is not at all enamored with Halloween Town, perhaps owing to his lack of agency in traveling there, and the mistreatment he received upon arrival. The cultural exposure is harder for him to appreciate when rudely thrust upon him by happenstance. Having abducted Santa Claus, Jack feels prepared to usurp a role that Santa Claus has learned for years, and one that is rooted within his culture. In the poem that Tim Burton adapted the movie from, Jack goes further in insisting that Santa Claus is to take on the role of the Pumpkin King for Halloween. This goes to show that Jack also has a naive attitude towards the complexity of his own culture. Halloween Town and its conventions may well be mundane to him, but to assume that Santa Claus will be able to immediately acclimate to the lifestyle that Jack and his townspeople have spent years developing is, at best, ingenuous. As Christmas Eve beckons, Jack launches into the night, riding his ghostly chariot drawn by skeleton reindeers. He carries numerous Christmas gifts manufactured by Halloween Town's residents. These gifts, including dangerous snakes and shrunken heads, are rather different from the gifts delivered in previous years. Some of the gifts come close to achieving Christmasland authenticity, but fall short of this perfection by deviating in subtle ways. For example, a mechanical duck that would be cute and amusing as a present is revealed as frightening by minor design decisions, such as its serrated teeth and disturbing quacking cadence, perhaps emblematic of the impossibility that comes with trying to fully eliminate Halloween Town's cultural character from their workmanship. Frightened by Jack and his activities, authorities are soon alerted. Military forces are mobilized and begin to fire missiles at Jack as he merrily sails through the sky. Far from feeling afraid, Jack's initial interpretation of the missiles being fired at him is that people are expressing gratitude towards him for delivering Christmas, demonstrating the rather extreme extent of his delusional hubris. Jack's sleigh is eventually struck, leaving Jack plummeting towards the earth. Jack lands in a graveyard. Confronted by the morose hallmarks of death, Jack is reminded of home. This strikes an epiphany in Jack, who reflects on the true affinity he has with his own culture, and finally draws his attention to the grave mistake he has made. Jack decides to release Santa Claus, who swiftly goes about saving Christmas. As a gift for his liberation, Santa makes it snow in Halloween Town, and Jack returns home to find his townspeople in a state of wonder, as snowflakes drift through the air and the usual landmarks of his home are gently blanketed in snow. Santa Claus's gesture has allowed Jack and the other residents of Halloween Town to enjoy Christmasland, without erroneously appropriating it. Marking this effective cultural exchange, Santa Claus wishes the residents of Halloween Town a happy Halloween, and Jack wishes him a Merry Christmas in return. The Nightmare Before Christmas can ultimately be interpreted as a fable, and the beauty of fables comes from the use of a story, no matter how absurd on the face of it, to weave together moral lessons applicable to the world that we live in. This is not a cautionary tale against enjoying other cultures. Nightmare Before Christmas instead illustrates that culture is complicated. In Jack's case, the culture of Christmastown ran far further than his numerous calculations were able to ascertain. Whether on a personal or political level, attempts to subdue or amalgamate other cultures should always be made with great trepidation. As summarized by Santa to Jack at the end of Burton's poem, "My dear Jack," said Santa, "I applaud your intent. I know wreaking such havoc was not what you meant, and so you were sad and feeling quite blue, but taking over Christmas was the wrong thing to do."